I want you to close your eyes for a second.
Okay.
Seriously. Just humor me here.
I'm playing along.
Imagine you are standing right in the middle of a valley.
Right.
It is noon. The sun is directly overhead, and it is hot.
Very hot.
And I don't mean like a summer day at the beach kind of hot. I mean the kind of heat that cracks the earth and makes the air literally shimmer in front of you.
Like an oven.
Yeah, 45, maybe 50 degrees Celsius.
That's a brutal kind of heat, the kind that kills you if you aren't prepared for it.
Exactly. So you're there, and you look down at the ground beneath your feet. It's rock. Hard, unforgiving rock.
Just barren.
Right. And someone standing next to you points at a spot in this totally barren, rocky bowl and says, right there, right in that specific spot, thousands of years ago, a spring of water exploded out of the ground.
It's the classic image.
Right. And not just a little trickle either. A spring so abundant, so powerful, that it has flowed nonstop for millennia, sustaining millions upon millions of people, defying the evaporation, defying the drought, defying the very desert itself.
It's an incredibly powerful story. I mean, it's the foundation of faith for billions of people. It's the story of the Zamzam well.
But, and this is a really big but today,
Okay.
what if the ground itself disagrees?
What do you mean by that?
What if you brought a geologist to that exact spot, and a hydrologist,
Yeah.
and a chemist? And what if they looked at the rocks, ran the numbers, tested the water, and they turned to you and said, this is impossible?
That is the startling premise we are grappling with today.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are doing something that might make some people uncomfortable, but we're doing it because the data is just undeniably fascinating.
It really is.
We are conducting what I can only really describe as a forensic audit of one of the most famous locations on Earth.
And we need to be very, very specific about where this audit is actually coming from. We aren't just, pulling theories out of thin air here.
Absolutely not.
Today's deep dive is based entirely, and I mean entirely, on the extensive research and writings of Dr. Khaled Waleed.
Right. And for those following the specific sourcing, the creator explicitly notes,
which means we are officially attributing this entire body of research to Dr. Khaled Waleed from the Almighty Covenant channel on YouTube.
Exactly. He has compiled this massive amount of technical data. We're talking geological surveys, water quality reports, desalination statistics, all to make a very controversial argument.
His central thesis is explosive. Dr. Waleed argues that the current location of Mecca, what he refers to in his text as the Forbidden Mecca, located in the Paran Desert, is a geological mismatch for the historical and scriptural descriptions of the Holy Land.
So basically he's saying you've got the wrong map.
Precisely. He focuses specifically on what he calls the Zamzam myth. He argues that we know today simply cannot be the water of life or the miraculous spring described in ancient texts.
This is the science.
Right. He uses hard science, hydrogeology, and chemistry to prove that the true Baca is actually in Palestine near Jerusalem and not in the Hijaz region of Saudi Arabia.
So our mission today is to essentially unpack this dossier.
Yes.
We're going to look at the rocks, we're going to do the math on the water usage, we're going to look at the chemical analysis, and we're going to see if Dr. Waleed's argument holds water. Pun totally intended.
Pun duly noted. And before we dive in, we have to state our standard disclaimer for the show.
Yes, of course.
We are here as impartial guides. We are exploring the arguments and the data contained specifically within Dr. Waleed's research. We're analyzing the internal logic of the source material.
We are not here to endorse a specific religious viewpoint.
No.
Or to tell you, the listener, what you should or shouldn't believe. We are simply here to ask the question, does the science back up the story?
Let's get our hands dirty then. Let's start with the ground itself. Okay. Because Dr. Waleed says if you really want to understand why the current location is a problem, you have to look at what's directly under your feet.
So this brings us to section 1 of our outline, the geological impossibility.
It sounds like a movie title. The geological impossibility.
It really does. But what is he actually pointing at when he says that?
He starts with the Arabian Shield. Have you ever heard of that formation?
I mean, it sounds like a missile defense system or something, but I assume it's rock.
It is a massive, massive geological formation that covers a huge chunk of the Arabian Peninsula. It's the basement, essentially. And Dr. Waleed points out that this shield is comprised primarily of igneous and metamorphic rocks.
Okay.
Specifically granite.
Granite. Okay, I have granite countertops in my kitchen. It's really hard stuff.
Exactly. Why do you use granite for countertops?
Because it doesn't scratch. And it doesn't stain. If I spill wine or coffee on it, I just wipe it right off.
Because it is non-porous. It doesn't absorb anything. In geology, we call this deaf rock.
Deaf rock. That's a really poetic term.
It means it doesn't listen to the water. It just doesn't accept it. Dr. Waleed draws a very sharp contrast here. He compares this deaf granite shield to sedimentary rock, things like limestone or sandstone.
Which are more like sponges, right?
Exactly. Sedimentary rock is extremely porous. It has holes and pockets. Water rains down, soaks into the rock, and creates these massive underground reservoirs called aquifers.
Right.
Water can travel for literally hundreds of miles underground in sedimentary rock. But in granite,
It's a wall.
it's a total barrier.
So if Mecca sits entirely on this deaf granite shield, Dr. Waleed is saying there's just no place for a giant miraculous aquifer to even hide.
Correct. The core geology simply doesn't support the existence of a deep, renewable water source in that specific location.
Okay, but playing devil's advocate here for a second. Water goes everywhere. Even granite cracks right. You have tectonic faults. Can't the water just be sitting in the cracks?
That's a fair question. And Dr. Waleed actually addresses it directly with what he calls the trap theory.
The trap theory.
Yes. He describes the Wadi Ibrahim, that's the specific valley where the shrine and the well are located, not as a spring source, but as a structural fault. Literally just a crack in the shield.
Okay, so it's a crack.
Think of it like a ceramic bowl or a depression in the ground. Mecca sits right at the bottom of this bowl, surrounded by these high, hard granite mountains.
Right.
When it rains, which is rare, and we'll get to that later, the water runs off the mountains because the rock is deaf. It rushes down and collects in this fault line, this depression.
So you're saying it's basically a puddle, like a very deep gravel-filled puddle.
In a strict geological sense, yes. It acts as a natural water trap. It collects surface runoff. It doesn't generate water from deep within the earth. It just catches whatever falls from the sky.
That feels like a very crucial distinction. The difference between water that is actively generated by the earth and water that is just caught by a hole in the ground.
It is the absolute crux of Dr. Waleed's argument in this first section. He makes a very specific distinction between a well, a bur, and a spring, an ain.
I feel like in just casual conversation, we use those words totally interchangeably. Like, oh, I'm going to the spring or I'm going to the well. But geologically speaking, they aren't the same thing at all, are they?
Not at all. And the source explains the physics of flow to illustrate this, specifically the concept of hydraulic head.
Okay, hydraulic head. Now I feel like I'm back in high school physics class. Unpack that for us.
It's actually quite simple. It's all about gravity and pressure. For a spring to flow naturally, to actually gush forth from the ground without a pump, the source of the water, the aquifer, must be at a higher elevation than the outlet.
Like a water tower in a town.
That's the perfect analogy. The water in the tank is high up in the air. The gravity creates pressure that pushes the water down the pipes and out of your kitchen tap. That is artesian pressure.
So for a spring to be a real spring, a real ain, the water basically has to push itself out of the ground.
Right. But Dr. Waleed argues that the Meccan reality is the exact opposite of that. Mecca is a depression. It's the bottom of the bowl.
Yeah.
There is no surrounding high-altitude water table in that specific granite formation to create that pressure. Therefore, he asserts that Zamzam is, by definition, a hand-dug well.
It's just a hole dug in the dirt.
A hole dug into the trap to access the runoff water sitting in the sediment. You have to actively lower a bucket. You have to work for it. The earth doesn't just give it to you.
And he compares this physical reality to the historical description of Baka.
Yes. The source material argues that the descriptions of the true Holy Land involve naturally flowing springs, water that bursts forth spontaneously, which fits the geology of Palestine perfectly, but directly contradicts the geology of Mecca.
There's one more detail in the geology section that I found really interesting. The alluvium layer.
Ah, yes. The 13 meters of silt.
Right. Dr. Waleed points out there's a specific layer of silt and sand about 13 meters deep sitting right under the site. Why does he focus so heavily on that?
Because alluvium is a very specific type of soil. It is deposited exclusively by flowing water. It's the sediment left behind by floods.
Okay.
Dr. Waleed argues that the existence of this 13-meter layer proves that water accumulation floods basically was happening in that valley for thousands of years before any human construction ever existed there.
Wait, so the narrative that the water magically appeared for the inhabitants, or that the spring burst forth to save a specific person at a specific time?
The geology contradicts that timeline entirely. The rocks tell a completely different story. The geological evidence suggests the trap was already there.
Wow.
The water was collecting there for millennia, depositing that silt layer by layer. The human construction happened much later, built on top of an already existing geological feature.
That really flips the script entirely, doesn't it? It goes from a miracle creates water to humans found a natural water trap and decided to build a shrine near it.
Exactly. But this leads us directly to the second major problem Dr. Waleed identifies in his research.
Yep.
Even if there is a natural trap there, and even if it does catch runoff water, is it enough?
This is section 2, the water audit. And honestly, this is where the math starts to get a little scary.
It really comes down to basic scarcity. We have to look at the catchment area.
Right.
The Wadi Ibrahim catchment, the actual area of land where rain can fall and physically roll down into this well, is only about 38 square kilometers.
38 square kilometers. That is tiny. That's like the size of a medium airport.
It is incredibly small in hydrological terms. And then you have to look at the climate data provided in the source. Rainfall there is less than 100 millimeters per year.
Which is basically a drizzle.
It's extreme aridity. And combined with that lack of rain, you have evaporation rates of 90% due to the extreme heat we talked about earlier.
So barely any rain actually falls. And most of what does fall evaporates into thin air before it can even soak into that granite trap.
Right.
So we have a severely limited supply, basically approaching zero natural input. But we have a massive demand. Dr. Waleed does the math on the consumption rate.
He does. He presents a fairly simple calculation based on the maximum historical yield of the well. The most optimistic hydrological data suggests the well could naturally yield between 11 to 18 liters per second.
11 to 18 liters per second. Okay, let's visualize that. That's like maybe 3 or 4 standard garden hoses running at full blast.
Roughly, yes. Now, that sounds like a decent amount of water if you're just filling a backyard swimming pool over the course of a week.
Yeah.
But now, apply that to the gap between supply and demand during the pilgrimage. You have millions of pilgrims.
Right. Millions of people descending on this one spot.
Let's do the math together. If you have, say, 2 million people, which is actually a conservative number for the peak season, and you rely solely on that specific well, Dr. Waleed's calculation shows the impossibility of the situation.
What's the final number he gets?
It comes out to roughly half a liter per person per day.
Half a liter.
That's one small plastic water bottle.
That's it for everything.
For drinking, for washing, for cooking, for ritual ablution, all in 40-degree heat.
That's mathematically impossible. People would die.
You would face mass dehydration within 48 hours, and the well itself, the aquifer, would completely collapse.
What happens then?
You get what's called a cone of depression. That's when the water level drops violently around a pump because you're sucking it out faster than it can refill. The cone would be total. The well would run completely dry in a matter of days, if not hours.
And here is the massive reality check for anyone listening. It doesn't run dry.
No, it certainly doesn't.
I mean, I've seen the videos. You've seen the videos. Millions of people are there. They are drinking freely. They are filling those giant yellow jerry cans to take home on airplanes. The taps are running constantly in all the luxury hotels.
Right.
So if the geology says no, and the math literally says no, where is all this water actually coming from?
This is where Dr. Waleed presents what he calls the smoking gun, the artificial solution. He cites official reports from the Saline Water Conversion Corporation, or the SWCC.
This is the Saudi government body that is responsible for desalination, right?
Correct. And the source states very clearly that 98 to 99% of the water consumed in Mecca comes from the Shuaibah desalination plants located on the Red Sea coast.
99%.
Yes, almost all of it. Dr. Waleed describes Mecca in this context as a synthetic entity. He uses a life support metaphor that I actually found really striking when reading the research.
Oh, so what's the metaphor?
Imagine a patient lying in a hospital bed, and they look completely healthy from the outside. Their cheeks are pink, their chest is rising and falling, they are breathing.
Okay.
But then you pull back the sheet, and you see tubes hooked up to a massive humming machine hidden next to the bed that is literally pumping the blood and oxygen for them.
That is a very dark image.
It is, but that is exactly his argument regarding the geography. He says the city is being kept alive artificially by industrial machines pumping water from the sea, stripping the salt out of it, and pumping it high up into the barren mountains.
Wow.
If the desalination plants stopped for just one day, if the power grid failed, the source argues the city would face a catastrophic and immediate water crisis. The natural water, the supposedly blessed water, is effectively gone.
There's also a claim in the source material about injection. And reading it, this feels like a conspiracy theory, but he claims it's standard operating procedure.
It is highly controversial to say out loud, but it is central to Dr. Waleed's argument. The source suggests that massive amounts of desalinated water are actively used to replenish or mix with the groundwater to maintain the illusion of a natural abundance.
So they are actively refilling the trap.
Essentially, yes. Pumping industrial desalinated water deep into the ground or heavily mixing it within the local distribution system so that the taps at the holy site just keep flowing magically.
So as a pilgrim, you think you're drinking ancient, miraculous spring water.
But chemically speaking, you might just be drinking water that was floating in the Red Sea 3 days ago.
That is wild. And that leads us right into the actual quality of the water itself. Section 3, the chemical truth. Because Dr. Waleed says even if it is mixed, the original groundwater that is actually there isn't good.
No, it's not. And this is where the forensic audit gets a little disturbing, frankly. Dr. Waleed references a very specific investigation from 2011 involving the BBC and the Association of Public Analysts in the UK.
I vaguely remember this making headlines. It was a huge scandal at the time.
The findings were very significant. The report cited by Dr. Waleed states that the tested water contained high levels of arsenic, 3 times the global legal limit, and dangerously high levels of nitrates.
Now, arsenic is a heavy metal poison. We all know that. But the nitrates, that's the part that really made me pause when going through the notes. Why are nitrates such a big deal in this context?
Well, in hydrogeology, high nitrates are basically a chemical fingerprint.
A fingerprint of what exactly?
Of organic decomposition.
Yeah.
Usually in testing, it points directly to agricultural runoff, like heavy fertilizers, or more commonly in dense areas, raw sewage.
Sewage.
We have to look at the closed basin problem we discussed again. Remember the bowl analogy?
The solid granite bowl that catches all the water.
Right. Mecca is a deep depression surrounded by solid hard rock. For centuries upon centuries, millions of people have lived there, visited there, camped there, and nature inevitably calls.
And before modern piped sewage systems existed,
Everything just went directly into the ground, but because it's a closed, rocky basin, there's nowhere for that waste to actually flush out. It doesn't flow downhill to a river. It doesn't flow out to the sea. It just sits there.
just accumulates in the dirt over hundreds of years.
Dr. Waleed argues the groundwater has essentially become a chemical sink for centuries of concentrated human waste. The high nitrates are the lingering chemical residue of that history. It is, to put it very bluntly as he does, the toilet of history.
That is a very different image than the purest healing water on earth.
It creates what the source calls the holy paradox.
Right. The traditional narrative is all about purity, healing, a miraculous cure for all illnesses.
But the hard chemical reality requires intense modern treatment. The source points out that the water currently distributed to the public undergoes massive chemical intervention. UV sterilization, heavy ozone treatment, and as we said, mixing with desalinated water.
So they are blasting this ancient holy water with industrial UV light just to kill the bacteria in it.
Dr. Waleed poses a very logical question here. If the water is truly blessed and inherently miraculous, why does it require millions of dollars of industrial sterilization equipment just to be safe for human consumption?
He argues that true blessed water shouldn't need a UV lamp plugged into a wall.
Exactly. He contrasts this sharply with the idea of natural purity found in the historical descriptions of Baca, where the water is naturally filtered by deep sedimentary earth and flows out totally clean.
Okay, let's recap where we are right now because this is heavy. We have a location that geology says physically cannot be a spring. We have a water supply that basic math says shouldn't be able to exist. We have chemistry that says the ground is contaminated. Dr. Waleed is basically standing there with a clipboard saying, guys, none of this adds up.
And that leads to the next obvious question. If this isn't the real place where Adikarunit is.
This brings us to section 4, geographic displacement, the tale of two cities.
This is where the source transitions from simply debunking the Mecca location to actively proposing the true alternative. Dr. Waleed argues that the true events, the historical story of Hagar and Ishmael, the original well, took place in Beersheba in southern Palestine.
Beersheba. Translated, that means the well of the seven or the well of the oath.
Correct. The source builds a strong case based on simple geographic logic. We know from the ancient texts, both the biblical and the Quranic traditions agree on this, that Abraham lived in Hebron.
Which is located in the West Bank in Palestine. We know that for a historical fact.
Yes. Dr. Waleed argues it is logically consistent for him to move his family around within the local Negev or Palestine region.
How far is Beersheba from Hebron, practically speaking?
It's a day or two of travel by foot or animal, maybe 40 or 50 kilometers total. It's a harsh journey in the desert, but it's very doable for a family.
Now compare that to the current location of Mecca.
Mecca is well over 1,000 kilometers away from Hebron.
Wow.
You'd have to cross the Nafud Desert. You'd have to cross some of the most hostile volcanic terrain on the entire planet.
So he's essentially saying, why in the world would an old man take a vulnerable baby and a woman and walk 1,200 kilometers into an absolute volcanic wasteland when there's a perfectly logical, scripturally accurate location just a day's walk down the road?
Exactly. It's an application of Occam's razor. The simplest geographic explanation is usually the correct one. And he argues further that the wilderness of Paran mentioned in ancient texts, which is very often associated with the Ishmael story, actually refers historically to the Sinai and Negev region.
So he says the map was intentionally changed later on.
He calls it the Paran misappropriation. He argues that later religious traditions falsely mapped the ancient name Paran down onto the Hijaz Mountains in Arabia simply to legitimize the Meccan site. Essentially, they stole the geography of the south of Palestine and literally pasted it onto the map of Arabia.
And what about the physical topography? How does Dr. Waleed's version of the Holy Land in Palestine compare physically to Mecca?
The contrast is totally stark. The source depicts the true Baca as having deep sedimentary rock. Remember, that's the natural sponge that holds vast aquifers. It has natural flowing springs, rivers, and abundant natural greenery.
Gardens, olive trees, fig trees, the exact stuff explicitly mentioned in all the holy books.
Exactly. Dr. Waleed compares this directly with the Quranic description of Mecca itself. The Quran literally calls it a valley without cultivation. The Arabic term is Kardis Sar.
A valley without cultivation, meaning nothing grows there.
Dr. Waleed argues that this description isn't a badge of honor for the location, it's actually a confession. The sheer lack of vegetation in Mecca is literal proof of its lack of natural blessing. In total contrast, Baca is naturally fertile. It sustains complex life without needing a billion-dollar desalination plant.
So if the geology is wrong, the water is totally scarce and chemically contaminated, and the geography just doesn't fit the story at all, why are we all looking at Mecca? Why is it the center of the world for so many millions of people?
This brings us to section 5, and this is where Dr. Waleed gets into the why, the economics of the deep dive.
He used a very specific term here in his research, the rabwa.
Yes, he defines rabwa in this specific context as a massive system of financial growth, or usury riba, that is carefully disguised as pure religion.
It's a business model.
A massively successful one. The source describes the modern pilgrimage not just as a spiritual journey of faith, but as a finely tuned financial engine. It is designed, according to Dr. Waleed, to extract wealth from the poor, whom he calls the learners, or the pilgrims, simply to enrich the local custodians of the site.
And the numbers provided are huge, right?
They are completely staggering. The source presents the core financial stats. Current revenues from the pilgrimage are estimated between $12 to $15 billion annually.
Annually.
Yes. But look at the projected revenues for their Vision 2030 plan. They're actively targeting upwards of $150 billion.
$150 billion. That's the GDP of a medium-sized developed country.
Right.
That's not a religious pilgrimage anymore. That's a Fortune 500 monopoly.
And when you break down the actual spending of the pilgrims, the source highlights that 45% of that money goes directly to luxury hotels. 25% goes to transport. It's fundamentally a mega tourism industry.
He uses an analogy in the text that really stuck with me, the ATM analogy.
Yes, it's very poignant. He compares the entire holy site to a giant cash machine. Think about the learners or the sincere pilgrims for a second. These are very often people coming from developing nations. They literally save their entire lives for this.
Right.
They sell their family land. They sell their wedding jewelry.
They liquidate everything they have to their name.
Just to make this one single trip, they pour their entire life savings into this machine. And what do they actually get in return? Dr. Waleed calls it an illusion supported by desalinated water.
It's a really harsh critique. He's saying the genuine spiritual experience of these people is being cynically monetized on an industrial scale.
And he goes even further than the money. He presents what he calls the idol argument. He points to the modern skyline of the city. Have you seen pictures of Mecca recently?
Yeah, I have. The clock tower building. It's absolutely gigantic. It looks like Big Ben on steroids, just looming over everything.
It physically towers over the Kaaba. Dr. Waleed argues that the physical construction itself, the cube, the Kaaba, and all the surrounding luxury infrastructure, the towering skyscrapers, the massive clock tower, they have literally become idols of modern materialism.
That the building itself has become the actual object of worship, rather than the internal search for knowledge or the true connection to the divine.
Precisely. He argues that the sheer visual spectacle completely overshadows the spiritual search. The focus is entirely on touching the stone, seeing the structure, being in the physical location, even if that location is geologically fake, rather than understanding the meaning. You are basically worshiping the empty shell, not the pearl inside.
This is a massive amount of information to take in. We've covered deep geology, chemistry, historical geography, and macroeconomics. Let's try to synthesize this in Section 6. Let's put it all together.
The source provides a really helpful recap for this, a table of comparisons. Let's visualize the final scorecard here.
Okay, let's run through it quickly. Mecca versus Baka.
Rock type. Mecca is built on igneous rock, specifically granite. Baka is built on sedimentary rock.
So one is a solid barrier, one is a porous sponge.
Water source. Mecca relies on stagnant wells that require manual digging and pumps. Baka features naturally flowing artesian spring.
One you have to dig deeply for, one comes right out to you.
Sustainability. Mecca relies almost entirely on artificial desalination. It's man-made. Baka has a self-sustaining natural water cycle.
One is on literal life support, one is naturally alive.
Water quality. Mecca's groundwater is chemically contaminated with dangerous arsenic and high nitrates from waste. Baka provides naturally clean fresh water.
One is toxic, one is pure.
Geographic location. Mecca is an isolated, harsh desert valley. Baka is a historically connected, fertile land.
It's essentially a checklist of dead versus alive.
That is the absolute core of Dr. Waleed's final conclusion. He returns one last time to the concept of fossil water.
Remind us exactly what that term means again.
Fossil water is ancient water that was trapped deep underground millions of years ago during different climatic periods. It's not part of the current active rain cycle. It's exactly like drilling for oil. Once you suck it all out of the ground, it's gone. It doesn't refill.
So Dr. Waleed is saying that any natural water that actually was originally inside the Mecca trap
is totally gone. It is exhausted. Hence the desperate need for the massive industrial intervention we see today.
And so Dr. Waleed's final overarching assertion from all this data.
He argues that the concept of the water of life and the true spiritual direction of millions have been geographically hijacked. He argues that the heavy reliance on modern technology on massive desalination plants to mimic an ancient miracle is the ultimate definitive proof of the site's illegitimacy.
Because a real miracle would need a saline conversion plant running 24/7.
That is his exact logic. If you have to spend billions to build a machine to fake the blessing simply isn't there anymore. The technology is just the mask that hides the grim geological reality.
Wow. See, let's take a breath here. That is a massive, massive deconstruction of a very deeply held belief system.
It really is. And again, we're purely looking at this through the analytical lens of Dr. Khaled Waleed's research. His explicit goal is to use hard, verifiable science, the tangible, everyday realities of rocks and water, to challenge a deeply entrenched mythological narrative.
It really makes you think about the physical reality behind the ancient stories we are all told. I mean, we tend to just accept things because they're old, right? Like, oh, it's been there for 1,000 years, so it obviously must be true.
But rocks are much older than human stories. And rocks don't lie.
And that leads us perfectly to the outro. The final thought that Dr. Waleed leaves us with is a very provocative question.
It's the kind of question that really lingers in your head long after you put the report down.
What's the specific question?
If the water that sustains the entire holy site is 99% man-made and pumped from the sea, does the holiness actually reside in the physical location, or is the holiness just a product of modern industrial engineering?
That's a heavy question to leave people with. Is the miracle the place, or is the miracle just the plumbing?
It directly challenges the listener to consider the profound implication of geological truth versus traditional narrative. Can a specific place truly be holy if the earth itself completely rejects the story?
That is definitely something to mull over on your own time. And a final reminder to you, the listener, everything we discussed today, all the statistics, the geological arguments, the chemical reports, the geographic history, all of this came directly from the extensive research of Dr. Khaled Waleed and the Almighty Covenant channel.
We are simply the messengers unpacking the data for you.
So the next time you see a beautiful picture of a desert oasis, or you hear an ancient story about a miraculous spring bursting from the sand, maybe you'll think about the deaf granite hiding underneath. Maybe you'll wonder about the hydraulic head and the artesian pressure.
Or, just check the nitrate levels.
Exactly. Always check the nitrate levels. Thank you for listening to this deep dive. Stay curious, stay critical, and we will see you next time.
Goodbye.